places. And he said once, when I have a week-long revival service, he said on Sunday I would meet the churchgoers, but on Monday I would meet Jesus' disciples. See, being a disciple assumes that a relationship with Christ exists, the kind of relationship that he wants to have with us. And Luke 14 here teaches us that the very essence of being Christ's disciple is a willingness, listen, to give up everything for him. A disciple is totally willing, totally available, totally confident, and totally obedient. Completely. If we were kind of change this up a little bit, we might say that Jesus is asking 4 questions to get people to think about what it means to be a disciple and what the cost will be to being a disciple. And so I want us to think about, in this sense, 4 questions that Jesus might ask each of us. And if you want to write these questions down, write them and pray over them this week. And answer them honestly. This is something just between you and God. And then let God show you where you are in your walk. Let him show you if you are a true disciple. Now, whatever your answer, know too that you can work to improve that. None of us are where we need to be yet. But we all can improve in that relationship. We can deepen that relationship. So think about these questions this week as you go about your lives. First question is this. Jesus might ask, where's your loyalty? Where's your loyalty? He says in verse 26, if you want to be my disciple, you must by comparison hate everyone else. Your father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, yes, even your own life. Otherwise, you cannot be my disciple. Now, this verse gives people a lot of problems, to be honest. I've had people over the years come to me and say, preacher, how can this be? Everywhere else, Jesus talks about love. God the Father is love. Jesus shares this message of love. And yet right here, he says, you got to hate everybody else. You got to hate your family. You've got to hate yourself. Or you can't be his disciple. I don't understand that. Well, the problem is not with what Jesus said. The problem is with the interpretation or the translation and the context. Because understand that there's a lot of words in the Hebrew language and the Greek language that don't translate very well into English. We don't have a word that can really capture the nuance or the understanding of certain words in the Greek language. For example, this Greek word hate, the Greek word for that is masio. And it doesn't carry this negative emotional weight that our word hate does. It's more of a negative preference. When we hear the word hate, we think, man, that's drastic. If I say I hate this or I hate that, it's kind of like when somebody asks me about eating certain things. I'll say, well, I hate liver. I hate liver. I don't eat organs. Okay? But he's talking about hating someone. But understand, he says by comparison. And so it's not, the word hate in the Greek language doesn't carry that same exact meaning that we understand hate. And in Matthew 10, verse 37, Jesus says basically the same thing, but he says it this way. Anyone who loves his father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. Anyone who loves his son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. And so what Jesus is saying in essence is he wants us to place him above any other relationship we have with anyone else. So he's literally not, in our language, saying you got to hate them. No, he says you just got to love me more. You can love them, but Jesus says you got to love me more. If you're going to be my disciple, I've got to be first on your list. Nothing else. I've got to be first. He wants us to love him above anything and everything else, to be loyal and faithful to him. What does it mean to be loyal? and reliable. Well, think about it this way. If your car starts once every 3 tries, would you consider it reliable? If the mailman only delivered your mail 3 times a week, would he be reliable? If you didn't go to work but once a month, wouldn't have a job long, would you be reliable? If your water heater every now and then gave you a cold shower, would you consider it to be reliable? Okay? If you fail to worship God 1 or 2 Sundays a month, would you expect to be called faithful and loyal? That's what Jesus is talking about. He says, you got to love me more than anything else you've ever loved in your life. Even yourself, you've got to love me first. So that's the first question. The second question Jesus might ask, will you let me lead your life? Will you let me lead your life? In other words, will we submit completely to Him? Verse 27, Jesus says, and if you do not carry your own cross and follow me, you cannot be my disciple. Now, what did He mean by that? Well, there's 2 key words that help us understand this verse. The word cross and the word me. Now, we know the cross represents death, okay? And that word me is Jesus referring to Himself. And He says, I will determine the direction for your life. What He's talking about is us dying to ourselves and then becoming what He would have us to become and allowing Him to direct every step of our life, every bit of the way. Paul understood this. Galatians 2:20, he wrote, I am crucified with Christ. I no longer live. Paul's saying, this man that I used to be, he no longer lives. Because I'm letting Jesus Christ control my every move, control my entire life. He leads every part of my life. And so that would be the question, if you're going to be a disciple. Will you let Jesus be in complete control of your life? Or will you live as you want to live? And, I can really identify with this one. Because there was a lot of years, many, many years ago when I was a young person, that, I would go to church occasionally. I even taught Sunday school sometimes back in the old days. But during the week, you know what? I lived for myself. I did what Sam wanted to do. It didn't work out very well after a period of time. But I was not a true disciple at that time. Because I was not willing to submit completely to let Jesus Christ handle every step, every part, every facet of my life. If you're going to be a disciple, you've got to commit to that. You've got to say, Lord, as bad as my life has been, here it is. I'm giving you my life. I want you to guide me every step of the way. That's being a disciple. Let Him lead your life. Third question He might ask us, do you understand the cost? This is an important one as well. Verse 28a, but don't begin until you count the cost. Okay? You got to know what you're getting into, Jesus is saying. If you're going to be my disciple, it's not going to be easy on you. You got to know what you're getting into. The cost of being Jesus' disciple is giving up anything and everything that would come between you and Him. If there's anything you place between you and Jesus or between you and God, that's your idol. If something has taken the place of Jesus in your life, that's an idol. And so Jesus says, do you understand what I'm asking you to give up? And Jesus invites us to discipleship, but He lets us know up front that it's not an easy commitment, that it's going to cost us something. Dietrich Bonhoeffer said this, salvation is free, but discipleship will cost you your life. See, Jesus wants us to be convinced that if we give up everything, the cost will be worth it. He doesn't want you to begin this walk and then somewhere down the road say, hey, it's not worth it. I didn't know what I was signing up for. This is too hard for me. I can't do it anymore. He doesn't want that. He wants you to know up front what it's going to cost you to be a disciple. And he's talking about more than just abandoning material possessions. He's talking about absolute, unconditional surrender. There's that word, to submit, to completely surrender and put him first. One more question you may ask us. Who are you influencing? If you're going to be a disciple, who are you influencing? Verse 34. Salt is good for seasoning, but if it loses its flavor, how do you make it salty again? What do we use salt for? To season our food. Jesus called us the salt of the earth. What did he mean? As disciples, we are to season those around us. In other words, we're to influence those people around us for Jesus Christ. If we're a disciple, that's what we're supposed to do. The true follower, the true disciple, will influence other people. I think probably one of the easiest tests to determine if someone is truly a disciple is simply ask them, who are you influencing for Jesus? Who are you discipling? And you know, there's a very serious warning in these final verses. Jesus is warning us to be very careful, because if we're not committed, we could lose our influence. We could lose our Christian influence. You know, not committed, not being open to God's leading in every situation. If those things happen, then there's going to be nothing distinctive about our life, and we're going to lose our influence. So Jesus says, if you're going to be my disciple, you've got to be ready to influence other people. Be the salt of the earth. And see, Jesus is not just asking us to join a club. He's asking us to be active. He's asking us to follow him. He's asking us to give up everything else and give our lives to him. He's asking us to be disciples, followers, and learners. And if you think about it, what do you think, what could we see happen here at Smyrna if we had a church full, not just members, a church full of disciples? What if we had a church full of disciples that were ready to go out that door and influence the world for Christ and share the gospel? It'd be a great success story. I'm going to leave you with these words. I don't know who wrote it. The author's name has been lost through the years. But as you imagine a church filled with disciples, listen to these words. This is my church. It's composed of people just like me. It will be friendly if I am friendly. It will do a great work if I work. It will make generous gifts to many causes if I am generous. It will bring others into its fellowship if I bring them. Its seats will be filled if I fill them. It will be a church of loyalty and love, of faith and service, if I who make it what it is am filled with these things. Therefore, with God's help, I dedicate myself to the task of being all these things I want my church to be. A church filled with disciples. Amen. Amen. The closing hymn this morning is found on page 452. Go and make of all disciples, page 452. And let's sing together. Baptist Church filled with the disciples. And now we'll have a blessing for our meal. Lord, we just thank you for the day that you've given us. We thank you for those that prepared this meal. And as we go next door now, we just ask you bless this fellowship, this time of gathering, bless this food to our bodies, and our bodies to your service.